Hi, and welcome to another episode of Two Healthcare Guys. Today with us we have Dr. Periaswamy and Lisa Davies of iCAD. Dr. Periaswamy is currently the Chief Research Scientist and VP of Clinical Innovation at iCAD. He's been with iCAD since 2007. Dr. Periaswamy completed his PhD in 2003 from Dartmouth College with a focus on computer vision and applications in medical imaging. After graduation, he worked as staff scientist for Siemens Medical Solutions in the Computer-Aided Diagnosis Group from 2003 to 2007. Dr. Periaswamy has been involved in the research, development, and clinical studies for various commercial computer-aided detection and diagnosis products, including lung, colon, prostate, and breast, as well as various workflow improvement tools in the medical domain. His passion, though, is to apply mathematics and algorithms to create real-world solutions that help save lives. So, Dr. Periaswamy, thank you so much for being on Two Healthcare Guys. I've really been looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for that nice introduction.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. And Lisa as well. We're great to see you again.
Thank you. Yeah.
So before we get started, could you tell us just a little bit, for those that aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about the iCAD company and your AI tool, Profound.
Yes, absolutely. I'll take this one away. iCAD is a company that is focused in women's imaging, and we've been around for a while. We actually started the whole concept of CAD for breast imaging with our Second Look application, and Senthil has helped bring us to the next generation of bringing AI to breast imaging, specifically to the tomosynthesis data. So your question around what is Profound AI? Well, Profound AI is a platform that we have built a number of modules around. So it is a suite of products. So there's the detection component, which is the more widely adopted, been on the market for a number of years for the tomosynthesis and identifying areas of interest and providing a confidence score associated with. There's also our Profound AI risk, which is a 2-year absolute risk that is looking prospectively at the patient. So at the time of screening, there would be a risk score that identifies. So typically, this is something that is significantly enhancing what it is that is happening in the market today based on the Gale model or Tyrer-Cuzick. So that is what we're doing based on imaging, so as opposed to patient's history. So that's the suite of products that we'll be kind of referencing today in terms of the applications at iCAD.
Well, awesome. I'm really glad. Thank you for that. And I'm certainly not a data scientist nor an expert in AI, and I would really like to learn a little bit more about AI and how it works and how you do that. But first, just to help me understand, we've had CAD for a while, hence the name iCAD. But we've had computer-aided detection in mammography for quite some time. How do you see, or how would you define the difference between what we know of as CAD and artificial intelligence?
Sure. So artificial intelligence, under artificial intelligence, we have CAD. So CAD falls under that broad umbrella.
Okay.
The difference between the CAD that we had before and our current versions is the fact that we're able to leverage some of the latest technologies, latest advancements in the field, especially things like deep learning, to improve the performance to a point where we're able to significantly help radiologists. AI is a broader term.
Right.
Under AI, we have machine learning, and CAD is a component of that, is an application of machine learning. And deep learning is a specific way of approaching machine learning. So it's a technique.
Oh, okay. So deep learning and machine learning are techniques that are and how you train?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then Kyle, what I would do is I'd like to just tie back the differences. So in terms of the false positives or accuracy of the traditional CAD is significantly different than how the new algorithm behaves. And then there's also a difference in how the FDA has cleared these applications, which is the traditional CAD is a second look. So the radiologist would read the exam with no marks and then ask for those marks to be presented. Whereas the Profound AI with the deep learning algorithms, with the AI components, it is cleared to be presented at the time of opening the exam. So not only is there differences in terms of the technology and those elements, there's also a difference in how that came to market.
Okay.
That's a very good point. We wanted this product to help the radiologists in their workflow. And in the past, for the 2D CAD, the indications for use were they were supposed to read the case without our CAD and then turn on the CAD after they read it, and then they could change their decision. But in practice, radiologists need the help right away, especially when they're going through these large volumes. And so we designed our product along with the reader study such that they have the option to use it concurrently as they read whatever they want.
Oh, okay. And does it do the same thing in terms of highlighting areas of interest or regions where they might
That's right.
find microcalcifications?
That's right. Essentially, they have the option to switch it on and off at any point during their reading.
Oh, okay, great. And what type of, you said it's there for the assistance of the radiologist. What types of improvements are you seeing? Is it just about the sensitivity? Is it about speed of reading? What do radiologists say the benefits are?
Lisa, I'll leave it to you for this one.
Okay, I'll take that one away as well. Yes,
Okay.
so radiologists are experiencing an improved reading time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take a step back from kind of going forward on that piece as well, is that inherently the differences between the traditional CAD and the Profound AI is the traditional CAD was more just stars, squares, asterisks,
Right.
things like that. Whereas with the Profound AI, we're actually contouring the area of interest and then associating a confidence score, which is anywhere from 0 to 100%. So it's a little bit more clear to the radiologist, as well as there is a case study. So taking a look at all of the data for all of that patient and then providing a case score at the higher level and then also down at the image or series level is providing information. So yes, being that information is being provided at the same time as opening the case, the radiologists are able to, with more confidence, move through cases faster. So a part of our reader study showed that there was a 52% increase in reading time. So essentially cutting it in half, putting them back at the time that it was taking them to read a traditional 4-image exam. They are improved in their accuracy.
Okay.
And that accuracy improves by 5.7%. So just reading tomosynthesis by itself and then adding Profound AI, they're improved. So essentially, we are helping them do much more than they were in terms of that on their own than what they're doing now together. And then also, most importantly, in terms of what is happening for the patient, is that the recall rates do go down. So they're calling back the right patients as opposed to a little bit overcalling, you might say. So again, from our reader study, we are seeing a reduction in recall rates by 7.2%. What's great though, Kyle, and I'll just add this little piece, is we've been out on the market long enough now that we're actually getting clinical feedback from clients that are using it in practice, and they're seeing numbers greater than what we were seeing in our reader exams or reader studies. So that's cool too.
Right. Let me add a couple of things.
Please.
So as Lisa was saying, the first and foremost, it's helping them find more cancer. So we found that on average, the readers were finding 8% more cancers. That's a very significant number. At the same time, they were improving their recall rate. So they were recalling less people. So simultaneously, we improved on specificity. And that's huge because in the past, many of the studies have shown that they can increase the cancer detection rate by a little bit, but sacrificing by calling back more people. Okay, and so the fact that we're able to show both an improvement, a huge improvement in sensitivity and specificity, I think is what really makes this product very valuable. And then, as Lisa mentioned, not only were we able to show that, they were also able to read faster. So on average, the radiologists reduced the reading time by more than half. Which is significant. And Lisa also mentioned the area under the curve, the AUC metric. So the AUC measures the sensitivity and specificity values across all possibilities. And so it's kind of a summary statistics. that tells you about the performance of the device. And we were able to show a significant improvement in AUC compared to just a radiologist. So radiologists using our device compared to just a radiologist, we were able to show a 0.057 or 0.06 improvement in AUC.
So just could you help for me? I don't remember from my last statistics class. What is sensitivity and specificity? Could you just sort of
Oh,
define
sure.
those for anyone that might be
Oh, yeah,
listening
yeah, yeah.
and
Sure,
me?
sure. Yeah. Definitely. So sensitivity refers to the percentage of cancers correctly identified.
Okay,
Okay, and specificity refers to the percent of non-cancer cases that are correctly identified.
okay.
So for example, if you call every case a cancer case,
Hmm.
you'll have a very high sensitivity. It'll be 100% because you'll catch all the cancers.
Right.
But it's not very useful because your specificity is zero,
Okay.
and everybody will have to be recalled and treated. Right?
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Uh,
sensitivity would be the correct diagnosis of cancer, and specificity would be the correct or the lack of false positives. Is
that's
that
right. That's right. There's a
okay?
trade-off.
Okay.
There's usually a trade-off between these, and that's reflected in what's called an ROC curve.
Hmm.
And the area under this curve is what's referred to as the AUC. So these are some
Gotcha.
terms that are used. But the bottom line is sensitivity is related to finding more cancers.
Hmm.
Specificity is related to finding, to correctly identifying more normals.
Gotcha. We certainly don't want to call people back and put them through the cost and more than that the stress of coming back to for a false negative.
That's right,
Um,
especially because the prevalence rate for cancers is around 5 to 6 per thousand. And so most of the women that you will be screening will not have a cancer. And so you want to make sure that you don't call back too many people.
right.
A small percentage is a large absolute number in terms of specificity.
Right. So you also mentioned a speed of read, and obviously with the advance of tomosynthesis, there's many more slices or many more images to read for a mammography study. How is it that radiologists are able to read faster with AI?
Um, that's a good question. I think what happens is in the case where there is a lesion, so
Hmm.
they have to look through these images. It's almost like finding a needle in the haystack.
Right.
They have to go through, as I mentioned, for every 1,000 patients, not patients, for every 1,000 women, on average, you find 5 to 6 cancers, right? If you're looking for these cancers, and you have to scroll through the images. There are two views per image. There's a CC and MLO view. There's a left
Hmm.
and right breast, and these are large volumes. And so they have to find these things. So if we present a structure that is clearly a cancer, they can immediately say that, oh, yeah, that's it. I mean, there's a cancer there, right? And
Right.
so identification is much faster because of that. Furthermore, I mean, if the breast is not very dense, it's a very clear breast, and
Hmm.
then the case score is very low, they have some confidence that, oh, there's probably nothing there, and that's another way that they, I think, speed up. So how they benefit, I think, changes from radiologist to radiologist, but we've measured an average improvement in reading time.
So I would imagine if you're highlighting areas of interest, even if it's a low percentage certainty, if there's nothing on that particular image, they might feel more confident to look at it, but scroll through quickly to get to the next one that has a region or area of interest identified, so that they can make that final determination and then go to the next and the next image.
You're exactly right.
Okay. You've got some really cool posters back there. They looks like a couple of your scientists, maybe. What's going on back there, and who would your favorite scientist be?
It's hard to pick a favorite scientist. Each one has their huge strengths, and so I'm not going to pick one, but I'll say that these, a lot of these scientists are incredible in what they've achieved at such a young age. Yeah.
Well, that was no fun. Like I wanted to get you to pick
I know,
one.
Seth.
Like, come on, like
No,
Tesla
I
maybe,
no,
or
no, no, please
Edison.
don't.
I was really on
No,
the
I
edge of
don't
my
want to pick
seat.
a favorite. I would do a disservice to every other scientist.
They're all brilliant in different ways.
Yes.
stands out most about Einstein for you?
His wit, that's yeah, and the fact that I mean, his insights are absolutely amazing. Um, yeah.
So one of the things from your bio is that you like your passion is fusing math and algorithms, and I would call that science. I mean that's pretty hardcore science, but you're doing and applying that science to what is to my mind also there's an art to medicine. And that's why we have doctors, because they're practicing the art and putting not just facts and figures, but also in some very not clear cases, and they're putting all of this together. How is it? How do you go about fusing your science with their art to provide better outcomes?
That's a good question. I think part of it is first understanding what their workflow is, and translating that into something where we can help improve their workflow, right? And the math comes in all the way from algorithms that help differentiate between. I mean, if you're finding cancers, right? The
Right.
goal is to differentiate between something that's cancerous and many of the other confusing things that are in the image. And so mathematics allows us to quantify some of these ideas and incorporate them into a computer for us to solve these kind of problems. So it's a way of thinking about the problem and solving it with the help of computers in this specific application, right?
So how do you go about building an algorithm? How do you teach a computer that this thing is called a microcalcification and it's bad, and this is just normal tissue? What is it? How do you go about, or what goes into that teaching process to teach a
Sure.
program to do something?
Sure. So this is where the deep learning part becomes interesting. It used to be the case that we would work with the radiologists and understand what is it that they're looking for to describe these lesions. For instance, calcifications are small and bright. You have these spiculated lesions that have spicule-like things flowing out of them, and so that's what they would use to identify. And then we would build features. So we would describe these things mathematically and write algorithms that describe, texture and morphology and geometry of these structures. And then we would build simple classifiers to distinguish between these cancers and non-cancer false positives, what we call them. With deep learning, we just have to feed a lot of examples. So the features are learned by the optimization process directly. So it's the features and the classifiers are optimized jointly, and so we provide
What?
examples.
Pardon me for
It's a,
interrupting. What is
yeah.
a feature and what is a classifier? Because it
Oh,
sounds
sure,
like
yeah,
those terms are important.
sure, yes. So a feature is a numeric value that describes something about what we're looking for.
Okay.
So, for example, a feature could measure how round a structure is or how bright it is, and
Mm-hmm.
convert that into numeric value. Right? The more
Okay.
round it is, the more it's closer to one. The less round it is, the more closer it is to zero. The brighter it is, the more closer it is to one. The less bright, more closer it is to zero. And so these are all kind of features that describe the lesion. Okay,
Okay.
and so you have features that can describe texture, that can describe geometry or shape, that can describe intensities. And so you think about all of these, design them and put them in numbers. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have these set or this vector of numbers for cancers and for things that aren't cancers. And you when you design these features, you want to design it so that the yes. So once you have these features, the next thing to do is to use a classifier to distinguish between the cancers and the non-cancers. So for all our candidates, we have features, a whole bunch of features, and then the classifier helps us to distinguish between those that are cancer and those that are not. And so
Okay.
it learned kind of a boundary between what's cancer and what's not. That's what we use to output a specific finding that we think is cancerous. Does that help?
That helps a lot. And so you were saying that using features is different than using deep learning? Is that what I
Yeah. So
understood?
deep learning, yes. So deep learning, the features are learned by the algorithm too. So we don't have to hand code features anymore. They're automatically learned.
Okay.
At this point. And that's one of the huge advantages, which is to optimize the problem from end to end, right? So
Hmm.
instead of optimizing each individual component, like the features first and then the classifiers, here we're iterating the both the features and the classifiers jointly.
Okay. So deep learning is just the latest of the iterations in how to build the AI. In this case, you don't have to manually or define the features, define the classifiers, and then, that was, I guess, the old AI, like 6 months or 12 months ago, ancient. And deep learning is the newer, where you give it a larger data set and then it defines the features and classifiers on its own.
That's right. You mentioned something very important, which is a large data set. Um, I guess in this day and age, we have a lot more digital data. A lot more things are being digitized.
Hmm.
And the traditional algorithms started to plateau in performance, even though we added more data. Whereas the deep learning algorithms, they're much more complicated networks, but they scale better with more data. So what we're seeing is adding more data improves these deep learning algorithms much better than we could in the traditional sense.
Okay. And so when you say add more data, do you just provide studies, the images and the report? Does someone have to go in and mark regions of interest, or do you just feed it, this is cancer, this is not cancer, and let it figure it out?
It's a good question. So this is called supervised learning, where we
Okay.
have labels for everything. So what happens is when we get a case, we also get the reports, and then a radiologist goes in and annotates the lesion. And these are usually pathology proven to be cancer. And
Okay.
so that's our gold standard. And so we have examples of these cancers. And then the algorithm spits out these true positives, which are cancer lesions, as well as a lot of things that could confuse it, which are the non-cancers, right? And so we
Okay.
know these labels, and so we use supervised learning to distinguish between these cancer cases and non-cancer lesions.
Okay. So you don't
Not
just
immediately.
feed it a ton of images. You actually go back and will pull out and curate data where it is known to be positive cancer finding through biopsies or other means, so that we don't accidentally train it on train it on false positives. Is that what I
That's right.
heard?
That's right. So we show it positive examples and we show it negative examples, and its
Hmm.
job is to, given a new lesion, to figure out if it goes in the positive class or negative class.
Okay.
So that's why it's supervised. We have
Gotcha.
examples of both the positive and negative classes during
So
training.
as you go through the training and validation process, do you ever find that the the algorithm has determined an incorrect factor, or a not a incorrect correlation, where it says, haha, this feature must be cancer, but it turns out to be, you know was it the correlation between margarine and divorce? There's all sorts of, with enough data, there's all sorts of false correlations.
No, good question. We do we do sometimes find structures that we believe is a cancer but isn't.
Okay.
It could sometimes be an obvious false positive. For example, there are some noise characteristics like when there's a clip in the image
Hmm.
that could produce some artifacts that look like microcalcifications, and so the algorithm would pick it up as a cancer lesion. Whereas a radiologist would say, "Oh, that's from these clips. That's pretty obvious to me that it's not, a
Right.
cancer." And so the algorithm does make mistakes and makes mistakes both ways.
Hmm. And generally, you find those, as part of the validation step before it gets out into the wild.
That's right. That's right. We kind of try to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the system. So these systems aren't perfect, but these tools help make the radiologists better radiologists. That we
Right.
have evidence of.
So where do you get all of the where do you get all of the sample data that you train from? That's an interesting and tends to be a bigger question in the industry right now about where the data comes from. There's even the monetization of data. So where do you get your data and how do you curate it?
Yes, so we have to make sure that we have a wide variety of places that we get data from, just to make sure that we don't overtrain on a specific site. And so we have to make sure that we have a good representation of sites. And we have sites all over the US and in Europe. And also we have to make sure we have a good representation of the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
So these algorithms work across, the different manufacturers like GE, Siemens, and Hologic, and each of these have different characteristics for their tomosynthesis exams. The technologies are slightly different for each of these, and so we have to make sure that we have a good representation across these different scanners and across different centers. And so we have a dedicated team that has the ability to extract all of this information from different hospital systems, from different sites, and they're the ones that help us collect and curate this data.
Okay, very cool. And I think at one point you mentioned a risk scoring system, Lisa. So
I did.
that's so we've been talking about lesion identification, which is the finding of
Tomo
the cancer,
detection. Yep.
right? So what else is there in the and what goes into or what are the features? Thank you for giving me the right word. What are the features that go into the risk score?
So, yeah, so first of all, what does this risk mean, right? So the idea is right now we're finding cancer, we're helping the radiologists find cancer in the patients,
Mm-hmm.
in the population, right? But there's a lot more information in the image. For instance, there's been a lot of interest in breast density. We know
Okay.
that if there's a dense breast, then you have a higher chance of either hiding the lesion, plus there's actually a higher chance of having cancer.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of interest in, if your dense is breast, then maybe you should have some supplemental screening and so on and so forth. But there's a lot more going on in the breast than just density.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we come in. So we're able to look at these images, and we have an algorithm right now that can predict if a woman will have cancer during the next screening. So the idea is if you have a high risk, then you have a high likelihood that by your next screening you will have cancer, and vice versa. If you have a low risk, most likely you won't have a cancer. And so that's a tool that we're working on and improving. Right now, it's available for 2D images or FFDM images, and we're very excited about the next generation, which is going to work on tomosynthesis. Plus, has a much better accuracy, and we believe that that could be a game changer because you'll have the power to almost predict the future in some sense, right? I think. Yeah.
And so, and so I'll just, if you, if you may, if I may, I'll just add to that is on the market today, the standard for high risk programs is really informing the patient over a 10-year or a lifetime score.
Mm-hmm.
And that may have resonation outside of the US for most people. However, it feels as though in the US, we're very much a now culture. And for me, knowing if in the next 2 years I'm going to develop breast cancer, I can make life choices. I can make decisions around that treatment, having that information. Whereas telling me, Lisa, in the next 10 years or the life or your full life, you might develop breast cancer. Well, that doesn't give me a lot of guidance around what it is I'm doing. Because we think about this, right? I'm making business plans with my financial that has a run rate of 2 years or greater. I'm making travel plans, life plans around where I'm living, things like that. And that has resonation with me around what is happening with my body over the next 2 years. So I think that that's going to help swing what it is that we're doing with our primary care, with OBs, what's happening in the radiology department. So just, I wanted to add, like, what does that mean for the patient, not just what we're seeing inside of the algorithm.
I think it's that in that sense it's more relevant than a lifetime risk, right? You want to know Because if you evaluate your short-term risk over a long period of time, that gives you your long-term risk, right? But you're really interested to know in the short term when you're going to develop cancer.
Right.
Well, and I think it's more actionable information. So
Exactly. Yeah.
something sometime in the future is very nebulous. That's not very actionable, as you said. It's hard to remain focused. But if this is giving you a very, in the more specificity of what you need to be doing to better care for yourself, and to your point, we need to treat the patients that we have, not the patients we want. So this is what our population does, and we need to give them the best care we can. So I think it
Yes,
makes perfect sense.
it's towards individualized precision medicine, I think.
Correct. Yeah.
No,
I
that's a
think I think that's true. And I think in terms of what does that impact have is it can increase the relationship between patient and doctor. And I think that can adjust how we're caring for ourselves as well as informing our families.
so obviously iCAD mainly focuses on the 2D and 3D tomo, but I read a lot about ultrasounds and breast MRI now, particularly with caring for dense breast tissue. How does that fit into the larger issue of cancer detection, and is that something that iCAD will be going after?
Sure. So that's part of the supplemental screening. So once in mammography, once they identify a lesion
Mm-hmm.
or something suspicious, then the next step is, they either go to ultrasound or they could go get an MR. So it's a natural progression. It's the next step, and we do have tools we have worked in the past on, especially on MR. There's also a contrast mammography.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a possibility. There's even a 3D ultrasound now. There's a whole I guess field of emerging technologies to do with supplemental screening, and that is something that we're investigating. What is the next, I guess, product that we should be working on that can help people?
Right. So, what are the biggest challenges for radiologists in the mammography space, maybe not in terms of image interpretation, but in the larger context workflow? What are the challenges that you see in the mammography space?
I think I think the biggest factor is fatigue. The biggest challenge, I mean. Um, um, you remember now they have to read almost 100 times more information, right? Instead of an
Okay.
image, they have to read volumes. They have to scroll through. These are 3D studies, and so I think that the biggest challenge for them is fatigue, and it's because of the incidence rates. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, right? You're going to look, or you have to look at 1,000 images before you find one with a cancer, and so I think that's the biggest challenge.
And then, of course, the profound assists in that by highlighting and attempting to direct attention or focus attention to the possible needles that are found.
Exactly. Yeah.
It also helps with the concept of satisfaction of search. So oftentimes there are cancers that are bilateral
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't always present that way. So perhaps you are looking at the right breast first and you find that cancer. The radiologist may say, "Awesome, I'm done. I found it. I'm moving on," and they've now missed what's happening in the other breast. So Profound AI, by having all that information up front, can help address that satisfaction of search.
Yeah. Yeah, the term satisfaction of search, as Lisa is using it, is correct, but radiologists are afraid because the satisfaction of search has a negative connotation for radiologists sometimes, in that if they see a structure and they focus on it, they may lose the actual lesion, and they're afraid of this term, and so it makes a lot of sense the way Lisa is presenting it. Lisa is presenting it, but to radiologists, satisfaction of search could be something negative. So, in the sense, the way they use that term, yeah.
So let me take you outside of the U.S. for just a moment. I believe I've read that in NHS, all mammography is required to be read twice by radiologists. And what do you see in terms of the progression of AI? When do you feel AI would be ready to take over the secondary read, or How do you see AI fitting into the shortage of radiologists and the increase in the number of images, which is happening all worldwide?
Right. I think using this technology as a second reader makes a lot of sense, especially if you don't have enough radiologists. But you need large studies to gather evidence, and these have to be multi-center, multi-site, multi-ethnicity
Mm-hmm.
studies to show that this is feasible. And right now, all of these studies are ongoing. I think it'll take some time. So even if the technology is there, you have to prove that this technology works well. And so I think we're at that point now. But in the future, I think we'll start seeing. Right now, these tools are assisting, but the level of assistance could be much more in the future. I think there's another application where in some countries it's very hard to find radiologists to read, and so
Right.
perhaps you can prioritize some of these cases to send over and get them read somewhere else. That's another application of some of this technology.
So if you were taking an AI algorithm and wanting to send it to different parts of the world, just think North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, would you have to retrain the algorithm with different data sets based on the population? Is the bias of population and equipment enough that you would have to retrain based on geography and population?
That's a good question. So as far as we can see, that is not the case so far. We're studying that right now. Our algorithms are pretty robust across different manufacturers and different ethnicity groups. That being said, there could be differences.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I expect there to be differences. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, it is possible that we will find more cancers in a certain population, ethnicity group. That's a good thing, I think.
Right.
The bad thing is if we have a weakness where there's one population that's being underserved. And so
Mm-hmm.
we are looking into that more carefully. That possibly exists, but in general, I think we're okay on average.
How would you find that? Like, what would be the steps to identify that, as you're rolling into various world markets?
So we would need to collect specific. So if we suspect that there's a certain population that we don't perform well in, we'd have to collect a lot of data. We'll have to sample a representative amount of data and see what the performance is on that group. And we know what the average performance is, and then we can compare to see if it's better or worse.
Do you see a point where CMS or reimbursement rates here in the U.S. will include inducements for AI? Where will there be a higher reimbursement rate for AI or a lower reimbursement rate? What's your what's your prediction on that?
Sure, I think for yeah, I think for specific tasks outside mammography, yes. Within mammography, right now, I think it's been bundled.
Okay.
So it's not that it's not reimbursed; it's just that it's bundled with the actual care payments. And so I'm doubtful that detection will have separate reimbursement.
I see.
That is one of the things we are working on around the risk component,
Mm-hmm.
is having conversations around how can we leverage this for a reimbursement component similar to Gale model and entire QSIC.
Now, do you find that you have to go in and specifically integrate with each type of PACS or each PACS vendor or each reader, or is the integration piece fairly standard? You do it a couple of times, one per vendor, and then it's an off-the-shelf API at that point.
That's a good question. We produce standard structured report DICOM. Not all manufacturers or workstation vendors support structured SRs, and so we
Right.
also have the ability to produce GSPS image objects. So there's different techniques that we have that help in this process,
Mm-hmm.
and it really depends on the vendors and what they have implemented so far. So it is an open standard.
Right.
It hasn't been very well adopted. I think it's in the process of getting well adopted, and so there's part of that. But we're well integrated into most of the major packs and other workstations.
And if I remember right, your model is what I would call inline AI. So, but you've integrated between the acquisition device and the interpretation station. So it's running through your algorithm on-prem inline before it even arrives at PACS. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's the most common mode of operation today. It's within the hospital system, so it doesn't
Hmm.
have to leave the hospital. It's kind of a part of this attached to the scanner, right? So as soon as the images are acquired, they're sent to the processing box or CAD box.
Right.
The images are processed, and the results are sent usually to the PACS.
I mean, a lot of other AI vendors are currently operating on a model where something arrives at PAX, they shoot it up to the cloud, they process it, and then they shoot something back down to PAX, which of course impacts network bandwidth. What led you, or why are you using an inline model where so many others have a different methodology?
So these volumes are huge,
Hmm.
and so there's network issues. There's also privacy issues sending them outside the hospital, and the runtime needs where a radiologist wants to look at these things really quickly, and so we can't afford to send them somewhere, get them processed, and get the results come back in on their networks. And so I think there is a future for that, and there is a use case where it is cloud-based. But right now, most of our customers prefer this solution. But I think we're evolving towards more cloud-based systems, and of course, we're working in that.
Right. So, what is the future of AI? So, if you take out your crystal ball, and look at 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what do you see in terms of mammography, in terms of the adoption? Where will AI be? Just free form question. Where do you think this is
Sure,
going?
sure. I think radiologists will have lots of cool tools to play with that are going to help them. But I think the next evolution of the technology is so. First of all, there is the accuracy, right? You want the systems to be even more accurate than they are today, and that's going to happen. Like your phones get smaller and smaller and have a lot more memory, and
Hmm.
all of those things. So that's one dimension of the progression. I think the more interesting one is to do with explainable models. So right now, this is a black box, and then we have an output. And then you may ask, why is it doing this? And we don't have an explanation. We don't really
Right.
know, in fact, because these algorithms are black boxes. So I think we need to build explainable models, and that I think will also build trust. I think that's the future.
Okay. I look forward to that. I've read about explainable models, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I'd love to know, how did it come up to that conclusion?
And especially
Um,
in healthcare, yes, that's important.
right. What about here's another one that we see a lot in literature is what about the liability? Where does liability lie in an AI model? Is it still
Sure. So yeah. So if you have an algorithm that doesn't need anybody's supervision, then who gets sued, right?
right?
Um, so yeah, that's a good question. But the way I look at this is, I think that's a lawyer's game in that I think people always will get sued. This is just a technology that's going to help radiologists. I think that part is an unnecessary burden sometimes. I mean, there are two sides for that coin.
Right.
I don't know exactly how that's going to end up, but it is an issue and concern. In fact, unfortunately, radiologists face this fear all the time, right? They're
Hmm.
worried about liability and getting sued. And I'm hoping that they will see this tool as helping them avoid that, right? Because if you find more cancers and you find more cancers earlier, then you're less likely to get sued. So I kind of see it as helping them in this process.
So, Dr. Paraswamy, what would you want to tell to informaticists like myself that don't know a lot about mammography? We don't know a lot about AI. What are the couple messages that we need to take away, and how can we better take care of patients?
Can you repeat?
um,
Yeah, I didn't get the gist of the question. I heard you, but I didn't understand. Please ask again, or ask in a
for
different way.
right. So, what would you want, PACS administrators or PACS informaticists like myself, what are the one or two most important points that we need to know about the
Oh,
mammography space?
oh, sure. I think what's really interesting in the PACS domain is that's where the data sits. So I think it will be much more productive to have our algorithms sit on or very close to where the data is. So being able to access this data by the PACS vendors to process and produce results. That way, if you have an updated algorithm, for instance, right, you can
Hmm.
always be using the latest. A radiologist doesn't have to worry about where these or the IT people don't have to worry about where the box resides. I think integrating PACS with this AI technology could be a huge thing. I'm sure we're headed in that direction.
Do you think there would be any benefit to having an AI algorithm not look at solely the current exam, but is there a potential future where AI looks at the last three or the last five mammograms, and would there be an additional benefit to sensitivity by having some of that by looking at three cases in a progression longitudinally?
I think you should join iCAD. You have all the right ideas. So, yes, when radiologists look at these images, they also have the prior. So
Hmm.
we look at just the current image, but a radiologist has the current image, the priors, and the reports, right?
Right.
And they're able to make a better decision. And so I think that incorporating all of that will allow us to make better decisions too. And we are working on just that.
Oh, very cool. Okay, I can't wait to see it.
Mhm.
So, we're getting close on time, and I want to be respectful of your time. What I read your bio in the beginning. What gets you? What are you passionate about? What gets you up in the morning? And why did you go out and decide to become build AI?
Oh, the ability to help save lives. I think is something that motivates me. I think that's what iCAD is about, and that's why I'm a part of iCAD. I think all of us share that vision and that passion. It's not just me, by the way. It's a whole team, right?
Hmm.
So there's a team of scientists, engineers. There is the marketing team. There's a sales team. There's a regulatory team, and all of these members, I think, share this common passion. And all of us have to work, I guess, together, and each piece is important, and that contributes to the overall success of the product. And so I think that the very simple answer is the passion is to help save lives, and iCAD shares
Well, you can't ask for anything better than that to make the world a better place.
that. It's we're privileged in that sense.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, what would you all say? What would we want to tell the patient population if, for the patients out there that might be listening to this, what's the one or two things they need to know about mammography and women's care in general? What do you want them to hear?
They are empowered to ask their physician and imaging center if they're using the Profound AI, and that they should be asking for tomosynthesis when they go in for their screener. It's just it gives the radiologist an additional insight, gives additional insights into their exam.
Yes, it's a better imaging modality.
Hmm.
Well, I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Periaswamy and Lisa, for joining One Healthcare Guide today. Unfortunately, Wayne was unable to make it. But I think I'm truly blessed and happy to have you, and thank you for your time in educating me, but also thank you for the efforts that you put in to care for patients all over the world, and as you said, save patients' lives. Because at the end of the day, that's what we should all be here, and that's what we should all be focused on. So thank you for that
Thank
very much.
thank you, Kyle. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
Kyle.
this opportunity. Yes.
I've really enjoyed the talk. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.